evening. Welcome to South Asia Newsline. I'm Lipakshi Khurana. Here are the top stories we're tracking for you on Monday, the 23rd of November. Indian Prime Minister visits Singapore to boost ties. Bangladesh executes 2 opposition leaders for war crimes. And Nepal tens after 4 die in clashes with police over constitution. And now for all the details. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi arrived in Singapore on Monday after his visit to the Malaysian capital for the ASEAN summit. This would be Prime Minister Modi's second visit to Singapore since he took office in 2014.
Prime Minister Modi's 2-day visit to Singapore began on Monday and marked 50 years of bilateral relations between Singapore and India. Singapore has always been a significant trade and commerce partner of India, with trade flows reaching about $19 billion in 2013-14. The country is now the second largest source of FDI into India. India and Singapore are expected to conclude a strategic partnership and sign MOUs on enhanced defence cooperation and cyber security during PM Modi's visit. The Indian Prime Minister arrived in Singapore after participating in the ASEAN and East Asia Summit in Malaysia, where he spoke about the need for India to enhance cooperation with countries that lie to its east. Earlier in the day, PM Modi held bilateral talks with Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak, following which a joint statement was issued by the two countries.
You have provided leadership in combating extremism and radicalization, rejected any link between terrorism and religion, and in highlighting the real values of Islam. This is a great contribution to an important aspect of our global efforts against the challenges. We will also make our defense cooperation stronger, including for advancing maritime security and strengthening disaster response in our region.
The Malaysian Prime Minister also pledged to fight terrorism.
Malaysia and India, we share a lot of common position with respect to counter terrorism. We will work closely together to defeat violent extremism and terrorism.
During his stay in Malaysian capital Kuala Lumpur, PM Modi also held bilateral meetings with Chinese Premier Li Keqiang and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe on the sidelines of the ASEAN and East Asia Summit.
Bangladesh hanged Jamaat-e-Islami leader Ali Ehsan Mohammad Mujahid and Bangladesh Nationalist Party leader Salahuddin Qadir Chaudhry for committing crimes against humanity during the country's liberation war in 1971. The pro-Islamist Jamaat Party called for a countrywide shutdown in protest on Monday.
Bangladesh is on high alert after the 2 opposition leaders were hanged for war crimes during the country's 1971 liberation war. The executions took place Sunday after their petitions seeking presidential mercy were turned down by the head of the state. Thousands of extra police and border personnel have been deployed in Dhaka and other major cities and towns of Bangladesh ahead of the general strike call to protest against the executions. Mujahid, who was the chief of infamous Al-Badr force during the freedom struggle of 1971, was convicted for planning and instigating the killing of intellectuals and professionals. Salahuddin Qadir Chaudhry was a former minister in the Khalida Zia cabinet. He was convicted for committing genocide during the liberation war of 1971. Bangladesh, which was earlier known as East Pakistan, emerged as independent country in 1971 after fighting a 9-month-long civil war. The Pakistan Army and its local collaborators like the Jamaat had unleashed large-scale violence during the period, resulting in the death of some 3 million people.
Moving on to news from Nepal, 4 protesters in Nepal have been killed since Saturday during clashes with the police. The protesters have been opposing the country's newly adopted constitution.
situation continues to remain tense in Nepal after 4 Madhesi community protesters were killed and several injured during fresh clashes with the police. The incident is threatening to deepen a political crisis over the country's newly adopted constitution. Nepal has been in turmoil since September when it adopted the new charter. About 50 people have died in protests since then. People from ethnic Madhesi groups living along the border with India began protests saying the constitution did not accommodate their interests. According to them, the entire southern plain region, Nepal's breadbasket, must not be split into more than 2 federal provinces. But the new constitution divides the region into 6 of the 7 provinces in the country. The Madhesi protesters have blockaded trucks from neighbouring India for more than 2 months, leading to acute shortages of fuel and medicine. Nepal blames New Delhi for supporting the Indian-origin Madhes community, a charge India has strongly denied.
7 people, including a child, have been killed in a helicopter crash near Katra town of Jammu and Kashmir. The helicopter was ferrying Hindu pilgrims to Vaishno Devi Temple, one of the holiest temples in India. According to the authorities, the helicopter caught fire soon after taking off from Sanji Chhat. Every year, thousands of pilgrims climb 37 miles to worship the Hindu goddess. Helicopter services are popular among pilgrims who wish to avoid the strenuous hike. A mass funeral for Taliban militants said to have been killed by American airstrikes in Afghanistan was held in northwestern Pakistan. The militants were recruited by Al-Badr Mujahideen and Jamaat al-Dawa of Hafiz Saeed, say reports.
The funeral for the militants drew hundreds of mourners in the northwestern Pakistani district of Lower Dir. The militants reportedly belong to the twin districts of Lower and Upper Dir in northwestern region of Pakistan, close to the borders of Afghanistan. Al-Badr Mujahideen and Jamaat al-Dawa are insurgency groups which were formed to create disturbance in India's Kashmir. But due to tight security and strict measures in India, they shifted their activities from east to west. Although media coverage of such activities is totally blocked, but rare clips like these show how openly extremist groups are working and getting support on the soil of Pakistan.
Hope for survival fades for 100 miners who are still missing after landslide near a jade mine in Myanmar's northern Cochin. The rescue workers continue to scour the area to save as many people as possible.
Bodies of 104 people have been recovered after a landslide occurred near a mine in Ashpeka town, which is known for its vast jade mines. The victims were largely poor rural villagers who sought a living searching through soil for deposits of the precious green stone. The landslide, which occurred on early Saturday morning, buried dozens of huts near the mine where the workers were sleeping. The death toll is expected to rise as the hope of survival seems bleak on the second day of rescue operation. According to the officials, dumping by various mining companies had created a mountain of soil of about 200 feet high, which collapsed on Saturday. The region is said to be the home to some of the world's highest quality jade, which generates billions of dollars every year. According to researchers, most of the money goes to individuals and companies linked to Myanmar's former military rulers.
The Baloch diaspora in London recently held a peaceful demonstration in order to draw the attention of international media to the continuing atrocities by Pakistani security forces in Balochistan. A report.
Raising their voice against the continuous human rights violations in Balochistan, the demonstrators urged the international community to take notice of Baloch genocide. They claimed that the security agencies in Balochistan, which ruled the region with an iron fist, were responsible for the suspicious disappearance of Baloch women and children. The protesters claimed that about 28 women and their children were abducted by Pakistan paramilitary forces in Bolan district of Balochistan 3 weeks ago. The whereabouts of these women and children remain unknown even today. They demanded the safe release of Baloch civilians under their custody. Pakistani military has been charged with abducting and killing thousands of innocent Baloch, including women and children, since it occupied the region illegally in 1948. Locals claim Pakistan is carrying out an undeclared war in the region against those fighting for independence of their homeland.
NATO is set to increase support to Afghanistan's security forces amid the recent rise of Taliban insurgency in the country. NATO's latest step would help to prevent incidents similar to recent Taliban attacks in Afghanistan. The NATO members would also deploy trainers in the volatile regions of the country and provide air support during any events of emergency. The current situation in Afghanistan will be discussed at a meeting of foreign ministers in Brussels on 1st and 2nd of December. Currently, over 13,000 NATO troops have been deployed in Afghanistan to provide training, advice and assistance to the Afghan security forces. Sri Lankan President Maithripala Sirisena has thanked India for funding of various welfare projects in the country. He also spoke at length about the strong and abiding links between both the nations based on centuries of spiritual, cultural, linguistic and economic interaction. The President appreciated India's efforts during the inauguration of Mahatma Gandhi International Centre in Matale. India has contributed over $2.6 billion to Sri Lanka for its various projects. Well, that's the way it was in South Asia this evening. Before we conclude, the top stories once again. Indian Prime Minister visits Singapore to boost ties. Bangladesh executes 2 opposition leaders for war crimes. And Nepal tense after 4 die in clashes with police over constitution. Now our viewers can watch the show on SouthAsiaNewsline.com. You can also visit us on Facebook.com/SAsiaNewsline and follow us on Twitter @SAsiaNewsline. That's all in tonight's edition. We'll see you same time tomorrow. Good night.